My name is Barber. I'm a painter based in the Midwest. Uh, yeah, I live in Chicago right now. I'm in Salina, Kansas. Just got back from Omaha, and I'm going to Detroit in on the 19th. So I'm making my business to hit all those points. So yeah. Um, my journey as an artist. Well, I guess in context of the question, so like I went to, so I'm from Detroit, went down to Atlanta, and went to a school called Atlanta College of Art, and it was very like hippy dippy, like real fine artsy, and so my I'm trained, I'm cultivated to think more on the fine artsy side, like fuck the system type thing, and just create the art for art's sake and all this other stuff, or concept and things like that. But definitely for the art. Um, and I learned that that is the beginning of it. It's not the end of it. And I think that's necessary for you to cultivate a sound practice and cultivate your voice. Um, but then there's another leg to it. And so, as far as sustaining myself as an artist, I find that the best way to do that for me is to jump around the Midwest. To have collectors in various cities, so that I won't burn out the support in say Omaha, burn out the support in say Chicago or Detroit, what have you. You know what I mean? Challenges I face typically are my misunderstanding of what support looks like, you know. And I had that from the jump. I graduated from Atlanta College of Art, and I thought that my work was so good that people come knocking on the door and buying my shit. Um, and of course, it doesn't work like that. And then, like all the way up to like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was making smaller paintings to um, meet the budget of people who have interest in my work. But I realized that too was me not understanding my demographic. So um, I'm meeting that challenge by understanding that the people who want to support me may not have the space to support me, because I thought everything was about money. Like, oh, they can't spend $2,000 on a painting, so let me make $1,000 painting, and that's not always the case. Is that they would buy it, but they don't have the wall space. They don't have interior designers. They don't. They already got pictures of family right here. They got their favorite poster right there, and they're not willing to move it just to show me support. Just to show me that they want me to, continue on my journey, and just to support me as an artist. So then I was like, okay, now I need to start thinking about that when I'm creating. So I basically start diversifying my practice into like different levels. Well, I diversified my practice to performing arts too, and I diversified into public art. So those things help me stay on the road, so to speak. Like performing arts is something part of a collective called Propelled Animals, and it's a easy money grab because it's me and five other artists, and we're talking about very present day in the moment things as far as race, politics, all that stuff. And it's entertaining too, you know, just dance, trumpet player, things like that. Um, but in my personal practice, I diversify to public arts mainly. Well, I don't know if there's a mainly, but I definitely wanted my work to hit the people and be around the people. Um, and I also like the fact that there is like the money that they give you up front is a lot more. You know, the grants are a lot more because it requires a lot of different legs outside of the artist hosting or doing all the things. It requires fabrication. It requires meeting with the community. It requires a lot of sit down thinking time. And most grants in the public art realm pay you for that. Whereas if you're setting up for a gallery show, for instance, I just got asked to do a show in Chicago. I'm not sure if it comes with a stipend or not. So this morning, I sent a message like, "Hey, that's really awesome. Thank you for the opportunity. What are my responsibilities as an artist? What are my How can I find out the expectations and the support coming from the gallery? Those things I got to know up front because it takes money to move your art, and every time you move your art, you damage your art. It's a very, very important thing, and one thing that helped me to do it unblinkingly is because I realized that more than their agenda, right? The galleries have an agenda. The company who reached out to you has an agenda. They want it for whatever reason, but they also want to feel secure. So you kind of gotta. So what I did was I break it down. Like they want me to do it for as cheap as possible. I shouldn't say at cheap, but inexpensive for their budget. Like you know, what I'm saying, so they can meet their budget and have profit or whatever the case may be. But more than that, they want to feel secure. More than that, they want to feel secure. So they want it. They want to feel secure. Um, and when I advocate for myself, I check the box of making them feel secure because they know that okay, this person has been here before. They know what they're doing, and their level of expectation just like rose a bit more. And so, and with that comes the level of respect too, which helps when you're asking or requesting or trying to seek more information from them. So yeah, definitely, I think you know it's always better to advocate for yourself up front so they can know what they're getting into later. Yeah, sure. So like inspiration for me comes from a lot of different places. It really does. I think you know not to sound cliche, but like it comes from life. But if I was to narrow in on something right now, I'm reading the two major things right now is integrative acupressure uh, and pranayama, kriya, and kundalini. So those are the things that I'm thinking about. The integrative acupressure comes into play with my public art, and the kundalini kriya yoga comes into play with my paintings. But both of them have everything to do with how I move in my life. Like, you know, my breathing practice, I breathe in the morning. I'm practicing breathing now when I get these questions, you know. Um, and and I just started to do the tapping and the integrative acupressure. So these are things that I'm applying to my body that I find that could be great modes of expression or to support my practice when it comes to expressing myself. I would say so, but not in a good way. Like And I say not in a good way because typically artists are just happy to be working, and typically artists are seeking validation, or even in their grant writing, man. Like even when they're applying to something, if you and I'm speaking from personal experience. This is not me looking at someone. Like if I go back and I'm looking at these grants that I wrote for whatever these proposals, it's like I'm trying to prove to them that I'm worthy. I'm trying to convince them of something of me, that I believe in myself and all this other shit. And and there's whatever you reduce it is like seeking validation. And so I stopped doing that. Um, I, I ceased doing that years ago, and it's finally like tangible now. So probably like the last 2 years or so, where it's like that's not my mo. That's not how I move. And so because of that, yeah, I think I'm going outside the norm. As far as like practicality, yeah, like I look at Target, uh, Lowe's, um, the Bemis. Like I look at their structure and how they got started, particularly Lowe's, because I worked at Lowe's in 2005 and realized it blew my mind, dude. Like as far as like a crash course on business, like I almost want to recommend every artist after college just like work there and get indoctrinated by their propaganda, and figure out how you can apply it to your practice, because it's kind of it's solid stuff. But anyway, I just noticed how businesses, let's take Lowe's for instance, started really small and didn't move out, or started really small and then decided that, oh, um, I can make more money if I move over here, and then I could become a region if I tap these other, things. Like how they ask for zip codes, right? When they're on your purchase. Yeah, they're asking for zip codes so they could figure out the next demographic to invest in. As artists, or for me, early on, I wanted everybody to come to me. I wanted people to find me. I wanted them to seek me out. I wasn't Not that I wasn't willing to go to them, but I definitely wanted them to come to me and say, "Oh, your shit is good. I want to buy it." And now I don't do that. I'm moving around, and I'm treating myself like a person who wants a franchise. That's kind of how I'm doing it. I'm treating myself just like that. Like in order to figure that out, in order to find out where I'm going to go next, I have to go places. I have to meet the community. I have to figure out if there's reciprocity, right? And let go of a city if it's not reciprocal. If just because the people are great, the food is great, and everybody's so cool and awesome, doesn't mean that my art, my business is gonna blossom there. Those two things don't equate. Uh, yes, it may feed my practice as far as like creative practice, but it's not sustaining my practice. And so I've learned to distinguish between those two things, and I use like Target and Lowe's and big business, models to inspire me to, or motivate me to move on that, in that regards. So yeah, I don't. That's kind of how I move. Yeah. Well, the first example I want to give, I don't have any history or data just yet, but I've been working towards it. And so um, I started doing these like urban memorials, and they're like public artworks, structures, and they're based off, yeah, they're based off, urban memorials typically you'll find in um, black neighborhoods, and I'm specifying black neighborhoods because of the aesthetic value. Um, and I've done Atlanta, so I guess it does have legs. I did one in Atlanta. I did one in Charlotte. No, I did one at the Charlotte Street Foundation in Kansas, and I just got commissioned to do one in Chicago. And so the idea is to, and they've so far have been temporary structures. My hope is to have them be permanent. And this one in Chicago, I'm going to do it in such a way where it could turn permanent. And so yeah, so that is me like yeah, going to those cities, meeting with the community, because it's basically think of a totem. So it's the whole thing is based off. It's me telling their story, um, inspired by the Gullah Geechee and how they, yeah, memorialized the dead. So I'll reverse a little bit. Okay, so um, I'm from Detroit and I was in Atlanta, and I was doing a residency at MoCap, Museum of Contemporary Art Detroit. So I was driving from Atlanta to Detroit like every other weekend. And going back home, I saw these urban memorials that were still up, weathered as hell, but still up untouched by the community or the municipality. And so, and at the time, I was thinking of how to get my work from the four white walls and into the community, and or get the community into the four white walls to look at my work, to have a conversation. Um, and so, long story shorter, I just realized there was a reverence that the community had for those urban memorials, and I was thinking, how can I get that same respect, get that same aesthetic value? How can I instill that same connection and aesthetic value in my work? And I was doing paintings, oil or acrylic at the time. And so I started to do the research on where they actually come from and how they got started. And that led me to the Gullah Geechee in the Carolinas. So the Gullah Geechee was one of the few um, tribes brought over from West Africa that was allowed to keep their culture and keep their language. Because most times um, the slave owners will disperse and confuse the language and separate the people so that it could prevent uprising. But the reason why they kept the Gullah Geechee uh, connected and with one another together is because they was really good at cultivating rice. And so that was the price of it. They was like, we gonna let them talk their shit, do all their dances, as long as they keep that rice producing. And so, however, whenever someone would die, they weren't allowed to have tombstones, headstones, because the idea was that the enslaved didn't have souls. So, what is there to honor and what is there to identify? And so, in response, the Gullah Geechee would put, Big Joe's favorite hat. If Big Joe died, then Big Joe's favorite hat went on top of the mound. They use anything from toilets, that's what the article was saying, false teeth, mugs, rakes, boots, whatever identified that person, so that when everybody went past, they was like, that's Big Joe's hat, that must be Big Joe on the ground. And then, and I'm making a connection that practice continues even today, um, particularly in the black neighborhood, because our urban memorials are not pretty. They're very, very emotional. If you look at, if you Google like George Floyd's memorial, it's a bunch of shit, man. It's teddy bears. It's probably stuff from his room and flowers just kind of threw down there. It's a very emotional like dumping, involved. And when I was looking at other memorials from other cultures, is definitely more decorative. Um, the Mexican urban memorials are candles, more religious, spiritual, with the Mother Mary and things like that. So there's a different spin to it, and so inspired by that, I create these urban memorials based off concept and telling the story of the neighborhood before someone dies or something like that. So there's like a relationship, but it's just storytelling because that's all those objects are doing. They're telling the story of the person that passed. So speaking of franchise, um, my idea is to erect uh, a column or totem or a memorial all along the invisible path of our people, the visible path of the Underground Railroad, the visible path of the Great Migration, going to Omaha, going to Chicago, going to Detroit, going to LA. All along the way, we have these columns that speak to our travels, speak to our pursuit, speak to our tenacity, and hope for a better life. You know what I mean? And so, yeah. So in order to do that, I have to be like a traveling salesman, so to speak. Go in, meet the culture, convey this idea, connect this idea, and hope they like it. Write a grant, you know what I mean? And so it's not me in my studio painting away. Although my painting practice is definitely alive and well because it feeds me emotionally. In order for me to do these other things, I have to have that solid. So yeah, that's an example that I think about when it comes to just being inspired by franchise and McDonald's and everybody else. And so that's actually a great segue. So the name of it is called Barber's Annual Onward Upward Studio Sale. So this is me auctioning off uh, um, for 1 month only. Um, I auction off the drawings or art that I create in between major paintings, because the work that I do is fairly involved because it's improv, like it's on the go. It's sketched, but it's not drawn out. So there's a lot of room for musical notes that I never really intended for, or like colors that I never really intended for. You know what I mean? And so it takes me a long time, and it takes a lot of energy. So whenever I finish one, I draw, I do doodles and stuff like that. And I've learned to just collect those throughout the year. Then for 1 month, I put them on Instagram and I say, hey, these are the highest bid of 3 bids, because I'm not about to do all that work. So the highest bid of 3 bids wins, And so yeah, and so that's a way for me to keep it in house, not having to go to a gallery, hope that they sell it, have them take a percentage, and things like that. And there's also good data. At the time, Instagram was giving a lot of good analytics about which ones were clicked on and all this other stuff. But now I think you got to pay for those analytics, and so that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, so that's another business model that I try to apply, that I do implement in order to keep myself aground. Mainly, I want the artist to stop settling for bullshit, man. So it's two things that I think would change the art world for the better. It has everything to do with the artist. Um, Stop settling for bullshit, and 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 let go of the mentality that there's not enough to go around. Um, if if we can do that, especially when it comes to visual artists, bro. Um, if we can do that, last part about that mentality of scarcity, that is not only will it benefit the community, it'll benefit them because it'll open them up to more. Um, but having that mentality just holds us back. And then the other one with accepting bullshit, that I found that makes me look bad. You know, if a gallery comes to me and say, "Hey, I want to give you a show," um, oh yeah, I had one person come to me in Chicago. She said, "Hey, I want to." I forgot what organization she was doing, but she's a cultural worker, whatever, whatever, whatever. She was like, "Hey, you want to do an artist talk? You know, at this thing, there's a lot of whatever." And I was like, "Great. Is there a stipend with that?" You know, and then she didn't reply back, right? But if artists would value their time and request those things, then our answer would have been no, but no, but, right? Or yes, and you know what I'm saying? But it wouldn't have been like, who the hell does he think he is? It wouldn't have been that, right? And not saying that was her reply and that's why she didn't. It could have been a number of things why she never replied, right? As a matter of fact, I just saw her at a party and she offered me a solo. So, like, who knows, right? But that was the first offer was maybe a year and a half ago. So I'm like, well, damn, what happened? But like, anyway, if artists would just value their time, um, then galleries will come to expect to pay us, expect that, right? The gallery that reached out to me for a solo in January, they would have just said, "Hey, here's an offer." It would have came with numbers. It would have came with what they're going to do for me, if we expected that of them, right? But we don't. We're just so happy to be validated or so happy to be seen, that we just drink it up, and that keeps our annual income, our annual gross, very freaking low, dude, very low, and we doing it to ourselves. It's all about our expectations. You know what I mean? So we got to kill that, man. And then with the visual artists too, when I want to double back on the whole scarcity mentality, it'll help us help each other. Because one thing that I'm jealous of when it comes to musicians is that, they kind of need each other more so because they need a trio or, what I'm saying? It's a lot more moving parts. They need a drummer or something like that. And so there's open dialogue of them, what they call it, like the rhizome, like that is very much alive and well when it comes to musicians, and even in boxing too, which I noticed. I watched it. I actually like studied their business model, or their not their business model, but their structure and how they meet to the top. They gotta spar one another. They pay each other to spar. They pay each other well to spar. If you're fighting Floyd, then he's gonna pay you really well. Floyd is gonna pay the gym. You know what I'm saying? So it's like this whole um, in-house network situation, which there's a better word for that, but like it's all in-house. And so, but with visual artists, we think that this collector is only going to buy from me. you know, we don't want them to look at another collector. It's just, it's fucked up, man. You know what I'm saying? It's unnecessary. Dude, yeah, man. We'll all win eventually. And then you make friends along the way, and then they pull each other up, and so on and so forth. But regardless, if no one ever pulls you up, dude, we're all eating, and you're gonna learn. Like it's a think tank. You're gonna learn faster, way more faster. I'm making mistakes that I probably wouldn't make if I'm looking at somebody else and learning from somebody else, and they learn from me, I'm learning from them. Like, dude, we're all learn a lot faster, move a lot faster. Not that fast is good, but I should say we'll all move with way more quality, right? You know what I'm saying? With way more purpose instead of just reaching for the first, you know, yeah, seriously, like you're flowing, man. You know what I'm saying? You're not, yeah. So I think that mentality of scarcity, dude, is
I'm Sarah Hummel Jones. I'm a ceramic artist. I currently live in Omaha, Nebraska, originally from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I work at the Union for Contemporary Art.
My name is Dan Crane. I'm a 2D artist from Omaha, Nebraska, living in Omaha, Nebraska, and I also work at the Union for Contemporary Art.
So I went to school for art, got a bachelor's in ceramics, post-bac in ceramics, and then a master's in ceramics with the plan of being a professor. After grad school, I was like, absolutely not. I don't want to be a professor. I don't want to do the tenure track, politics, and all that kind of stuff. I do teach on the college level, but not full time, and I'm happy with that. So after grad school, I moved to New York City and was a ceramics tech and a studio assistant for a ceramic artist. And there I just really focused on like trying to make ends meet while being creative. And fortunately, one of my jobs, clay was free. So that was my creative outlet at the time. And then fortunately after that, I've just been able to get positions where I'm working within the ceramic field. And I feel really fortunate that that's the case. When I worked for that artist in New York, she was like, don't make more than your means. Like, you know, don't be making 6 feet ceramic pieces if you don't have a kiln that can fit a 6 foot piece in it. So I've had to like switch clay bodies to fit and work in an electric kiln to get effects that look like they came from a gas kiln. So like trying to be open and working within your means and what you have, I think is important, especially when on a budget, no matter like how small or big the budget.
I started meddling in creative endeavors in high school, some collaborative things, some private sort of like studio visual art things. I feel really fortunate to have been encouraged by my parents and went to art school, even though it was 1 year in Milwaukee and 3 years in Kansas City. It's not like I was like traveling the world or anything. I suppose like the perspective gained there in hindsight feels really invaluable. Being entrenched in a universe that is like putting artistic or creative endeavors on the forefront of like validation, I guess, and celebration. You know, it's like you're sort of thrown into the trenches of a whole bunch of people who are sort of like have this same pursuit, and so having that perspective feels really invaluable. As soon as school was done, I moved back home and basically worked in restaurants for many years. By the time I was ending school, I had stopped trying any projects that involved a large printing press because I like knew I would never have access to one again. I think like at the time in 2009, the only public shop that was a printmaking shop that was like available for use was something like $250 a month, and for somebody fresh out of school, fresh out of art school, that's just like not an option. So, but yeah, you kind of like stick with it and you know, continue to try to entrench yourself in creative communities. And you know, one conversation at an exhibition can lead to one side gig. One side gig can lead to something, you know, a part-time job, and then a part-time job can lead to a full-time job. Like you're at the whim of what's available in the city that you live in, and so yeah, like I said, it's kind of everyone's journey is going to look different, I guess.
So I think for me, like in grad school, I was doing a lot of casting with silicone, a lot of like hiring people to fabricate pieces, and that costs a lot of money. Not a lot of money, but costs significant amount of funds rather than figuring it out myself. So I think when I moved to New York and clay was the only option, that really shifted my practice to where, I mean, it's tattooed on my hand and I work with it every day. Fortunately, with the exception of the equipment, ceramics is pretty cost efficient in terms of like buying clay and glazes and raw materials. The equipment is costly, but I fortunately, when I moved to Omaha, was able to receive a grant from Amplify to get a wheel and a kiln and have my own studio space to make work. But then we also have places like the Union where you can come in and make stuff here. And I do that from time to time too because I like to be around community. Yeah, so I guess it just depends on your perspective.
I feel like at times I've thought that the community aspect to a studio practice is like completely integral. It's like you can't really have one without the other. I think that sentiment comes in a little hotter and more intense certain times. Obviously, like certain projects just necessitate the alone time in the studio. A lot of people ultimately like want eyes on the work, and so I think that's like very few people's experience to be like a studio hermit and then like still make that work opportunities wise. And it's almost just also good for like the human psyche to have FaceTime with other people. I mean, like just speaking outside of creative endeavors or being an artist, I think community is a nourishing thing. You do have to sort of pick your price and have good capacity foresight to make sure you don't get burned out on like openings or a friend's fundraiser or drinking and socializing too much. But yeah, community is sort of an integral part of the studio practice.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think community is important. For example, I work independently most of the time, 99% of the time, but then I'm going out in community once or twice a month doing pop-ups or exhibitions just for myself. That doesn't mean I'm not going to like other exhibitions too, because I do that as well. I'm at a place in my practice right now where I'm kind of wanting to scale down in terms of like how many pieces I'm making, refine them, and then kind of like, I've been calling it Clifford stilling from the world, where I'm keeping the artwork that I'm making and I'm making it for myself, and then one day I'll decide when it's time to share it again with community. And that's just where I'm at right now. That doesn't mean I don't want to be like a part of a community or value them, because they are one of my big inspirations. I get like really great ideas and great conversation, so I can't imagine having a practice without support around me.
And like community is such a, like, that word has morphed and changed and like is kind of a loaded word by this point in history, especially like URL, IRL. What is a community? What's my Facebook friend group? What's my Instagram followers community? A studio practice is always a juggling act to find your own right balance between what it is that you're trying to do for yourself versus what it is that you think you're doing for the audience.
That's our focus.
Yeah, just kind of what interests you right now? What are your
Yeah, my
what are the
interest right
theories?
now is ceramics, specifically making pottery on the wheel. And then here and there I'll hand build food for humor, but really making pottery as canvases for my drawings that are in my mind constantly. And then like kind of creating like a little world within those pots that then get dispersed to different homes. And then the content within the work that's going on the pot is the character Lady Hummel. She's a funny gal with multiple eyes, and she just shows up in different forms on the pots. She could be flying, she could be crying, but usually she's having a good time. I guess I'm really just interested in like cranking out work in a prolific way, but also being intentional with the pieces and the drawings.
I'm trying to conjure, I think I just wrote a list of like general studio interests. I like general mischief. I like to entertain. Humor is nice, is a nice thing. I was trying to come up with a phrase that meant like making a joke about something, but in a very respectful way. Fan art is something that always is very fascinating to me. I like fan art. Again, that's been coming in the form of like experimenting with color. I collect a lot of wood and fabric, and so I've been like borderline working on like applique and upholstery type projects that I say is about that list of things I just said, because that's what I'm thinking about when I'm doing it, but you might not think that by looking at it.
Christina Manelli, Abby, Maria, and Sarah will do pop-ups in Little Bohemia on 13th and William Street. And it's usually free to artists that they've been in connection with or invited to sell their work. And it's free to participate. I believe they do one every month starting in May. And then I think it ends around like September, October. But they've created this amazing community of art patrons or admirers or even artists coming, selling their work or meeting other artists. And I didn't really notice it until like a couple of years into doing it, because like the same people would show up or the same people would bring new people, and then those new people would come up by themselves, and then you'd see them again with another new person. And it's just great to see that they have this platform and they're willing to share it with other people who might need some like uplifting.
Yeah, it's like vendors and then like participators and fans of those vendors that you wouldn't really see anywhere else. I guess regular economic systems primarily have the focus on creating a culture of commerce. Like the culture is going out and buying stuff or wanting to go out and buy stuff, which like ultimately at the end of the day is an empty gesture that it's only going towards profiteering, I guess. Yeah, creativity versus a culture of commerce.
I guess I was thinking economic models provided for the artist as opposed to artists providing economic models. Some of the content I think about when making work is accessibility and accessibility within like art and owning art. So I often price my work anywhere from $5 to $1,000, but on average at pop-ups I'm bringing anything like 50 and under. And it's really important to me that anyone can access a piece of ceramic, big or small. So that's something I'm definitely thinking about when I'm making, and then after I'm making, like when pricing the work is really important. And then Dan has witnessed firsthand, I'm often the one to gift people stuff too, just because it's important to me to like share that, even if there is a barrier at times. I think I also think a lot about like heirloom within works, and not just ceramics, but like lots of objects. My mom's an interior designer and just has a lot of heirloom pieces and like growing up around that. So thinking about that when I'm making work and then like that person having that piece and either passing it down or sharing it with someone, like that's important too. And I think ceramics is great for that because of its longevity and material forever.
I think about a lot of Amplify's programming. I did 2 CS Art, which was community-supported art, where maybe like 20 artists were asked to make an edition of 40 pieces that were then funded by patrons. I don't know, but then outside of that, I mean, you know, maybe when I was like 23 or something, I brought a bunch of scrap wood together from a lot of different sources to make a big head and then set it on fire. I called it Burning Face. I guess I was in a lot of like punk bands and stuff in high school and throughout college, and so just sort of these like almost like visceral experience based reasons to gather versus like gallery experience, I guess. I don't know what you'd even call like what model is that to like put together a bunch of spare wood and set it on fire. Garbage gathering model. Foraging model, maybe.
I mean, similar to Dan, when I lived in Chicago during my post-bac, I scavenged the trash like crazy until they put up a camera. I mean, I found like paper and pens and brand new brushes that all these students would just throw away. And then on a similar note, got really obsessed with like long, skinny cardboard boxes. So started going around Chicago and finding them in like Blick art supply dumpsters from rolls of paper. I found, I think like 7 22-foot boxes from backdrop paper from SAIC. And I hoarded this stuff until I went to grad school and then started making large sculptures from them. And it was just funny thinking about like all this time I'm spending collecting this trash and trying to make it into these potentially hundreds of dollars sculptures to then recycle everything. It's kind of a funny process, but necessary for sure.
I suppose I would consider the union's co-op program and the union's fellowship program to technically be like alternative economic models. The union gets nonprofit funding and it's siloed to the programs, and then people who apply, artists, creatives who apply, like benefit from the super low cost of access into the co-op studios, or they apply and receive the fellowship program, so they receive the benefit of a year's worth of a studio and stipend. It's actually where Sarah and I met, was at the union's old building. We were part of the last fellowship program. All the time I'm talking about like, a conversation that I had with a fellow back then is still like sort of a lifelong friendship. The cross-pollinating that starts in one place, but then just like ripple effects to a bunch of different places and opportunities and people and things and friends and meals and good times.
Buy local art at full price from the artist. Continue supporting that artist, because I think that support and sustainability within that support is really important, and it's empowering. Like, I have people who come back and buy stuff and it makes me want to keep making more because they keep showing up. So I want to show up.
Like, if I've a lot of time tried to compare like having even a part-time job to purely gig working, and the consistency of even just the part-time job is the thing that's lacking in you're not sure if you're going to make $500 or $5,000, or if you got to really get creative about groceries this month, or and so yeah, I mean, I think it is sort of a fine line and like a balancing act that everybody has to figure out for themselves, because too much consistency can, in even a part-time job or situation, can take away from studio time, and so.
But sometimes it can create more structure and like time management, and then you're using your time that you have.
I think a lot about like, oh man, too bad the arts aren't as popular as like Husker football,
Yeah.
I don't know if that means it's like a full ideological, cultural shift of like.
I think that about painting.
Yeah.
Like, too bad ceramics isn't as popular as painting. Mm-hmm. But that's subjective.
So we need all the Huskers fans to be into local art, and we need them to buy it as much as they buy merchandise and season tickets. I think I imagine if I like think of my creative career right now, you know, there's a lot of energy throughout one's 20s that's like, I just want to have a place at the table. I just want like validation from, you know, the people in my direct environment who I see who are the opportunity like havers and things. I know I have a lot to offer and I just want everyone to know it. I think that mindset doesn't necessarily have good capacity foresight. So I think I would like just more studio time. I would like more studio time for more ambitious projects that aren't necessarily like crowdfundy type projects, but more just like a bigger painting that I know I have in my brain and just want the time and space to be able to bring to fruition. I envision less t-shirt printing and more like focusing on one big piece.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say baseball caps. They're a hot
less
item.
less dad
Next
hats
time
and
he
less-
drops a dad hat, get one. I personally right now feel like being like a brown recluse and just like cranking out pots that are more refined with intention. And that means, you know, just like smaller additions, but still several of them. And then one day when it feels right, either having an exhibition or a sale. But right now, just wanting to make for me and, you know, let people know that I'm still making, because I think that people should keep making. Breaks are great, which is why I think I'd like some time to myself.
I don't know why, but like the idea of ambition really comes into my head when you ask that, and I feel like some people are just like bulldoggedly, tenaciously ambitious. I don't think that's necessarily what it takes to like find yourself later in a sustainable creative practice, but it certainly takes some of that to like work through the shit of early 20s service industry work, especially if you know in your heart of hearts that you have more to offer than that. You gotta like think outside of the box. It sounds cliche, but you have to like get creative with how you're going to maintain the practice, and you do have to like identify both what it is that you need out of it for your soul, but then also like crunch the numbers and figure out how much it's going to cost, and then, you know, sort of like make a plan and attack. If that means collecting 22-foot long cardboard boxes for like an entire series, then yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I can only speak from like my perspective, and I feel like going through school, I was always, I was fortunate not to have to work during school and just focus on the art. But then it was really important for me after school to still be able to make the art. So I focused on finding work within my interests so I didn't get burnout or bored, to sustain like my lifestyle or like whatever rent or bills I needed to pay, but then still have some time to make was important. Not necessarily making full time. And then I had a professor in college that was like, you know, as long as you're working in ceramics and like you're keeping up with it, everything else will fall into place. And I used to always roll my eyes at it, but it is so true. And I don't think that that means you have to be doing it all day, every day, but spending some time throughout the month is good. Consistency is good. I also, I think having a vision is good, but I'm only speaking from my own perspective. I just feel like since school, I just was like kind of pretty specific on a track of like where I wanted to go. And fortunately it worked out. And that vision can change. And I sometimes am like, okay, then what's my 6-month plan? What's my 1-year plan? What's my 5-year plan?
Lean into your weirder instincts versus doing what you think it is that you need to do.
I think that you shouldn't even be paying attention to that part.
Totally right. And I think that will steer you into the lane that, like, because there's a million different like rabbit holes to like creative communities and a creative practice. So as long as you're staying true to like your like purest creative impulses, that will help you identify where it is that you can like coast with less friction. But then also, like you were saying, like goals change.
I mean,
I don't even think I should be giving advice, really.
Yeah, I'm 36 going on 37, and the goal was to be a professor, and now the goal is to be, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
A ceramicist.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is vague.
Yeah. Keep your goals vague.
Like if someone would have said, you know, how many years ago did I graduate college? So almost 15 years. That I'd be like in art admin, I would be like, no way. I don't have the capacity. I don't have the knowledge. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
And now here we are.
My name is Joel Damon, and we are in Project. I had been involved in putting together independent exhibitions in unused spaces in the city, and just got a reputation for doing that. And I think we were pretty successful at highlighting some really interesting regional artists. And we were approached by a group of visual artists that were visiting Omaha and had made some work here at a local residency, and they had just heard that we could help them put together a pop-up, and we met them and liked them, and we said that we would help find a space. And driving home from the bar that day, I passed by this storefront, and it said art space for lease on the front. It was all plywood, but yeah, so I called the number, and it turned out we knew the owner, and that was how this started, was just trying to help some artists show some work. When I first got really involved in the art community here, 2006, 2007, there were no spaces for this sort of activity. There were no opportunities for artists to experiment or anything like that. You could have maybe like a house exhibition. There was a coffee shop that might let you show their work, and aside from that, you needed to be represented by a commercial space. It just seemed, for a city this size, it seemed really lacking. I don't know why or what convinced me to do it, but I just decided to start making my own art shows. I would say that I would argue for the full spectrum of an answer to a need in the arts could be when it comes to spaces that offer programming for the public to engage with art. We need the high-end commercial space that sells $10,000 paintings. And we need the coffee shop that shows the high schoolers anime drawings, and we need everything in between. And so a space like this answers a specific need in the community. The idea of it being DIY and just sort of put together how we see fit by offering up this space as somewhere for experimentation and for things to not need to be profitable or bigger and better each year or anything like that. It helps provide another option for people to have an outlet to say, like, okay, maybe I can do that thing because there's a space for me here. We refer to Project a lot as an art fort. We really do want this to be the sort of place where you can just kind of come and be free. I remember seeing the community that they built in Hook with the Lost Boys. And so to have a space where it's just like anything goes, it's all right. Yeah, there's some tiny bit of order, but for the most part, for 10 years, we've gone without rules and everybody seems to be halfway okay. And the community is surrounding this and clapping for it. That's cool, right? That's like you want this like clubhouse. You want this thing where you've created this space that people feel some way at home here, and it really, this is what makes a city special. It's what builds culture. It's what we do together, and what we share with each other. And so, being a space that tries to continue to promote that, even on a really small, low budget level, it feels like a worthwhile community service when a lot of folks my age are saving up for a boat or something stupid like that. So this feels better. Yeah, how not to starve as an artist, and literally, and then how do you not starve your sort of spirit? I think if you expect to do something, I think to try to turn that into a way where you make money, into something that makes you money, isn't necessarily wrong. But if you only continue to make that work for yourself, if you do it because you're making it for yourself, I think you're going to find a big struggle. I think you'll find a lot of people not really caring about your work. Where that shifts is when you take those talents that you have, when you take something that you love doing, that you're good at doing, and you use that to help other people. There's something that comes out of that where your art, your creative expression transcends into something that can actually turn into something where you can use the things you love doing, the things you're good at, and actually use them throughout the day to help support your life. At the same time, there are so many people, so many businesses out there that will gladly drain you and not pay you nearly what you're worth. Most of this stuff starts on the internal. It is, I think, intended for us to share these outputs that come out of us as creative people, and then to decide to start with that, to lead in with, I'm going to use this to help others. I'm going to use this to make my community better. I'm going to use this to, for something else, not just for me. Then I think you're leading at least with the right foot. Is there a space where an artist can just make? In Omaha? It's a good question. There are artists that do it, The tricky thing is as big as we continue to become, we are a small community. There are already a handful of artists that have a pretty tight grip on the money that is available for art sales in Omaha. What's more realistic is what I've found, and what I would suggest to artists is that go get something that takes as little, go get a job that takes as little from you as possible, that allows you to live the life that you need to live in order to make the things that you need to make. If you can survive on just selling your work or the money that you make from your work, great, super. At the same time, be realistic. If you're attempting to be a career artist, understand that maybe that might hit when you're in your 40s. You might have to work a little extra and supplement your life a little bit in one way or another. I'm a big fan of having very enormous, blurry goals, because it's a lot harder to get disappointed or upset if you just say, I want to be able to support myself off of my art. How do we pick the exhibitions? There's a little more thought that goes into it, but the thing that we look for is to be surprised. We look at submissions all the time. We get a couple a week, and we've been doing this for a really long time. You see a lot, and you see a lot of the same, and you see when people are looking at the same websites or they're reading the same books or whatever, where these sort of trends are happening. It's so much fun to be surprised by something, to kind of go, oh, my heels, I forgot what it's like to be back on them. That is the initial, oh, this is different, this is new, this is telling me something I haven't heard before, or it's saying it in a new way. That's the initial thing we look for. You get that reaction by knowing what you're talking about when you're creating your work, by understanding it more than other people. Even if you're not following any rules, understanding what you're doing or attempting to do or reaching for or whatever it is you're doing, that's where that quality comes in. It's not in following certain rules. It's having such a strong vision in what you're doing that it is apparent on the other side by people that are just seeing the results of your work, not the work itself. If you don't figure out how to starve yourself, the world will do it. It's kind of a bitter, bitter response, but goodness, they're just like anything else. As an artist, you and the rest of the world are kind of your own worst enemy. You have to understand that you're here to make something to show other people. And to use that to drive you in what you're doing. To not starve as an artist, it also means you have to remain an artist and do everything you can to share it with the world around you, with your community. And that alone, just having that perspective, will help when you are starving, I guess.
My name is Nene, and I am a dancer and visual artist, performance artist, and holistic art therapist. I have created a full-time lifestyle based on my creativity as a human being in this world. So,
Beautiful.
yeah.
So tell me a little bit about when I reached out to you and I said the title of the project, How to Not Starve as an Artist. To me, it can have so many different meanings. What is something that maybe it evokes to you?
I changed the vocabulary immediately in my head, and instead of starving, I change it to fasting and making it be more of a choice. I can choose to be starving if I want to, or choose to struggle if I choose to have that be my story. And there have been times in my life that I feel like I have experienced that. And different types of struggle, but that was building who I am today as Nene, the creative, the artist of my life, my being and my world. So I see money as energy, and there are times that I have told myself that money is not important, and I believe that has built up, and I've experienced where money is important, and money can be toxic, and money can be what you want it to be, and that's not everything. I see my world as nourishment, so my creativity is like my food. My food is important to me. My environment is important to me. The people that I allow in makes me not feel so hungry. I feel satiated and satisfied as long as I'm providing. Well, one thing that I've learned about myself is how empathic I can be in groups. And so I had to take a moment, and I guess I looked at 2020 as a blessing to be able to turn inward. And so I've really been inward since then, and realizing that I'm not putting myself out there as much as I used to as an artist when I lived out in the Bay Area, or when I was down in Austin, Texas, or when I was overseas. So I have decided to make, and it was presented to me, I knew I needed to make a change, and I really wanted to, one, either leave and go somewhere else, but I've been here for 7 years, and I do enjoy the people that I have met and have relationships with, and I want to grow more, and I want to grow more just outside of just the art world too. So I've made the decision when it was presented to me to grab a space and a shared space with somebody where I'm going to be able to have 900 square feet of movement space. So I'll be able to, yeah, I'm really, really excited. I'm going to be able to have access to so many other artists and creative minds. And outside of there, it's also a part of Omaha that is expanding creatively. I feel that in the present, we are realizing that there's opportunity for growth. And what does that growth need to look like? And I feel like it's very relatable to myself. I'm growing, I'm constantly growing. What does that growth look like? I'm given an opportunity to go down to a space where they're turning buildings into functional operating spaces, livable spaces, which are going to bring a lot more people. And within that, then my artwork is going to be exposed. And the therapies that I do one-on-one, like here in my home, I'm going to be able to take the opportunity and open them up into workshops and into classes. And they have spaces there outside of just my studio space that I'm sharing, where I would be able to teach and hold these workshops. It expands out even further from that building into communities that are more out in nature, where I'm going to be holding workshops where we're exploring through art and creativity, working with our devils and demons, and how to, instead of fight with them, how to communicate with them, and how to tap into those ways of being creative and allowing ourselves to be authentic. And I just get really excited. I think, to answer your question, that I am expanding because I see opportunity for a thriving community and allowing myself to, I've been nurturing my soil, and I have really grown, and I am ready to take some of my soil and expand out and be able to get more nurturing yums and see what all blooms. I see it as I've created a lifestyle. And during that creation, and it's still being created, I am always going to be changing and evolving. I've just had the opportunities to be able to tap in and have the opportunity to explore and really discover who I am through art, and through other people and experiences, cultures, way of living, and tapping into ancestry, thinking about what has come before me, and if I am walking through my own world, how much power do I actually have, and how much connection do I have to all this ancestry? For a good handful of years, I've really been pondering that. I've really been exploring like who I'm going to be as an ancestor. And I show that in this most recent collection of artwork. And I explore that through plant medicine. I explore that through my connection as a spirit with spirit, such as land, such as nature, such as the urban jungle that we also live in. I didn't think I would talk about politics, but there is some excitement that is coming through, and I am choosing that excitement because I could find myself falling into a hole of darkness and worry and fear, and all that can do is, well, not all of that it can do. What it can do is allow me to not do anything. And I've chosen to do the opposite and instead look at those things of fear and use that as an invitation to get creative. And just through that view of the way that I'm choosing to look at my possibility of today and the outcome of today, I'm getting really excited about bringing my energy and being able to create a safe space that excites and stimulates others, tapping into their creativity and being able to be witness and to be able to grow and to be able to expand myself and to also just break down some walls and start creating, instead of walls, creating beautiful boundaries, because even plants create boundaries for each other to be able to help them, others, to grow. You know, I never thought I would ever come back to the Midwest. I grew up in southwest Iowa, about 45 minutes away from here, just over the river. My mom drove me up here for ballet all the time as a young child. And I never thought I would ever come back here. But nature was what told me that I was returning. Some people may think I'm absolutely bonkers, but I had birds that were just following and talking. I was at my folks' place in nature, and I could not get it out of my head. It wasn't as if they came over to me and were like, "Oh, Nene, you're moving back to Omaha." No, it's not like that. It's you're sitting in nature, and these creatures, these sentient beings, make themselves present. And if you're listening, you hear it. It's within you. And it's that creative voice within you that I want to be able to tap into others and allow them to be able to find their power. That excites me. What I would like to see change is the community outside of the artist community. I would really like to see we've become such a society of instant gratification that it's almost as if it's not on their iPad, their TV thing, their whatever instant gratification, their phone. And I fall victim of it as well, where I'm like, no way, I missed that. Probably because I wasn't paying attention to the real world, what was really going on, my world. I was in a scrolling world. So I would really love to be able to see like audiences, and I would really like to go to a art opening and not see the artists be the ones that are attending. I would like to be able to see more of Omaha actually be part of what they claim as a thriving Omaha community, instead of just the art community being an art community doing everything together. We're not thriving in the sense of all of us being able to even see or feel as if we can live as a full-time artist without having to get some sort of outside assistance that takes us outside of our dreams. And to hold responsibility for ourselves as well, and myself as an artist, and wanting to introduce or like, instead of just sitting back, I would like for us as artists to, I do feel some, more so here in the Midwest, and maybe it's because we are surrounded by sports. Like football is so important, and I just, there's a lot of competition, and I feel that there can be a lot of competitors who take instead of giving all the time. And so I feel that there is a lot of mishandled energy that could be restored through collaboration. And when I'm talking about collaboration, I'm actually talking about taking time working together to create something together, and not, hey, I have this, I have this. Oh, I feel if we actually spent a little bit more time getting to know how we can help each other. The first thing that comes to my mind is really start practicing not giving a fuck what anybody else thinks. Try really not to lose yourself to belong within something. Even in areas of education in greater minds, there are tones that can hide you, and it's part of the game. It's part of the challenge of really allowing yourself to keep true in a world that is full of conditions. Finding the practice of how you speak to yourself is important. Be that person you want to be. Even if you wake up and you feel like you have complications, roadways, it's going to be fucking challenging, and there are going to be times that are rock bottom. Use that to your advantage because you are doing the practice of unconditionally loving, working on breaking those the walls and creating boundaries that serve you.
My name is Casey Hallis. I'm a video artist, a painter, and a musician. Painting is like mixed media acrylic. I worked in textile printing, so I also integrate textile print into my paintings. Video is more performance-based. Video mixing, live performance art, and music. I do jazz, but house music and folk rock kind of stuff. Well, I think that when you're sort of called to be an artist, for example, for me, it's something that I had these experiences when I was young where it was sort of like brighter than reality, or something like, certain artists you might see, a poem you might hear, or say like a song, and in all three cases, these are like these moments that I had, and so becoming an artist was almost more of a like a spiritual calling, a metaphysical calling or something, than it was an economic calling. Now, I can't say that the two things aren't interrelated, because I'd say like the examples of the people that I admired or who inspired me were successful. Otherwise, I wouldn't have heard about them in the first place. And so, there's something about success and productivity and transcendence that happens in art, which is not a fundamentally practical aspect to it. So might get a sense of a calling without necessarily knowing how you're going to make money at it, but knowing that you in some way must do it. That's how it feels anyway. And so, to me, growing up and having these desires and ambition that started when I was really young. You're always, for me, now I have to say this has to do with my perspective. I don't think that, I think that reality has something more to do with like probabilities than it does to do with anything absolute. So this is not an absolute, these are not absolute statements, but like I knew I wanted to do something, and so there's always a inspiration side, and there's a practical side, and then what happens is inevitably you're always going to run up against the practical side. Well, what is art compared to commerce? Well, it's commerce that, if you're going to sell art, if you're going to make money at it, it's commerce that stands outside of what are normally mass-produced objects. And so if there is an economy for art, it means that people are interested in buying or supporting something that is not mass-produced. And so, to answer your question, the economic model is to basically find the audience. Now, I also fundamentally understood that in order to be an artist, I would also have to make money a separate way. And that for me was through production art, learning how to make art, and then learning how to do it professionally, or in a way that fits into commerce is the way that I went about being an artist in the first place. So,
how do you think that that economic model affects your work?
So I say initially, so I go back to the beginning of working. I realized that the idealism that I had and the reality were two totally different things. I probably learned this, very early on, like the first job that I had, professional job that I had, where, I submitted. There was a guy who needed a design, and I submitted two things: one that he wanted, which was very simple, and then one that I thought was interesting. And that very first rejection of him going, "What is this?" Was the wake up call for me. It's like that this is going to be hard. So the point is that this aspirational aspect of being an artist, or the spiritual nature of it, is at odds with the fact that most of life is business. Most of life for most people is business. Now, in terms of involving yourself in the money making process. And so I knew very early on that these things were sort of, not just different, but oppositional in some ways. But ultimately, life is a kind of compromise, and so there's the pole of the creativity, the pure aspect of art making, and the practical side of it. I think that the reality is that artists are, most artists, or the call to be an artist has something to do with creating a reality that is anyway, whereas commercialism is about creating a reality that is about few people having a lot, oftentimes. And so the way I often think is, okay, it can be anyway. Anything could be anyway, and here I am as an individual working in this larger system, trying to create these little moments, these little realities that are actually of a better design in a way, because they're more authentic to, say, a thinking or individual reality. I have my own aesthetic. I have my own life experience, and we're all actually quite unique and beautiful. And I kind of liken it to, say, a cosmic thing, like we're all kind of our own universes in a way. I think that this drive to be authentic and to be true to yourself and to be beautiful is something that is the driving force to making a community authentic. Community is in a way, I don't say antithesis, but it's the counterpoint to standardization. And so I believe that the role of the artist, or whether it's intentional or not, is something about always creating around myself, say, a bubble, and then taking that and then creating a more authentic and open space to communicate and to represent yourself, individuality in the community. And that actually, as it turns out, is not really, that aspect of being an artist is often not something that is commercially viable. But it's, I think, that one of the truest aspects to it. Why there are so many artists, and also why there are so many artists who don't even make money at it. It just I think it makes society better. Right now I'm finishing a painting show. And I say painting show, an exhibition. I'm filming that process, so I'm going to work on a video series about the paintings, and then I'm going to turn that also into an exhibition on film. So Those are my three main projects. I've got performance-based audio-visual that I'm doing that's based around sort of a DJ persona, and then I've got production I'm doing for basically my band, my folk rock band. All of this is sort of going to be under a production company that I am starting, which is featured or represented through web development that I did. So in effect, I'm creating also an artist community, commercial artist community of my own design. What I've really come to terms with personally is there's this aspect to being an aspirational aspect of being an artist, where you say the imagination can create any environment. But the world will tell you something different, and so my role or my present state is put my meaning into my work. It's less about just being a troll or putting statements up on the internet or complaining. I think the highest form of social criticism or commentary is the work itself, and so in a way these two sort of realities are, for me at present moment, are coming into a kind of synthesis now. I realize that I can only say so much or do so much, and I realize I'm constrained by a commercial system that will, if I go too far, will in effect blacklist me or alienate me. I've been alienated. I've gone too far in my life in terms of having to take a step back and rebuild and recharge and so on. So to me, the present moment is a lot about being able to express my care, express my sensitivity, and express my criticism in a way that also doesn't alienate me, and that has to do with kind of in a way understanding my audience, or conforming to an audience that is a PG-13 or I'm trying to make myself be authentic and accessible, and that is for the purpose of being able to make money as an artist in society. I don't think that it's a strange time in that there aren't, I mean, some people say it's postmodernism, but it's just the idea that there aren't major streams of thought or major components of reality that are based on, say, having just a few television stations, which is kind of how things started when I grew up. Expression and audience is very fragmented now, and so in effect, I don't think that I don't think we're living in a time where you're going to be the first one to do something in a lot of ways. More likely, you're going to want to be concerned with, yes, you can make your radical statements and you can do your experimentation, but ultimately, in order to make money, you kind of have to determine who your audience is and go for it. And that might be that you go for it and then you change. That's fine. But I'd say to some extent, if you want to be commercially viable, you would need to concern yourself with who you're trying to sell it to and how you're trying to sell it. Otherwise, it's just really just a spiritual act, which isn't bad, but don't fool yourself. You have to understand how you fit into the economy. Or, well, find an alternative economy, which I'm not saying don't do that, but a lot of people need to come together for that to actually transpire. So something I wanted to say has to do with, I thought about this, like how do you change the system, or how do you change, the way that people spend money? Ultimately, these are all choices. Now, if you want to, in effect, if you want to bypass the system that exists, you essentially need to create your own system, or you need to be a part of a system that other people are creating, which is not impossible, in fact. It just has to do with, let's say, willpower or design. Ultimately, it's design. The system that we live in is designed, and maybe it was designed in an evolutionary way. Well, it could also be designed in a conscious way. That very well may be the future. And I mean, in effect, I'm preparing to participate in that, but that is in effect, creating your own way of doing something, and then sort of matching up with other people. I think both things happen. You are an artist. You do create, you do envision. So it's a little bit of both. But to say, I mean, again, I say if you try to go your own way, and I did. You try to go your own way, you can only get so far by yourself. That's the truth. It doesn't matter who you are, how charming you are. Money may have more to do with it than anything. Ultimately, convincing people of an argument, having capital seems to do a lot more than having the right idea.
Can you think of a project that you did that was made possible when you were kind of going at it on your own, and you had that was made possible just because of that?
So I would say that the most success I had was at anything was probably a gallery art space that I had in Pittsburgh called Rocking Horse Art Space, which was a communal space. We had a lot of events, we had art shows, but let me tell you, I financed it myself. So I had capital, and the reason why I had capital is because I was successful as a production artist doing production art. I was a director of digital imaging, and then I was the U.S. artwork and production manager. These are high-level management jobs, and I was successful in the field, digital textile printing. So I was able to have the capital to do these things. And but even in that sense of the word, I wasn't running an art space to make money. It was a community. It's a community that I created. My goal wasn't to make money. My goal was to create community. And so I think in a way, I don't know. The two things are never separated in a way. You can't. I'm not making art to live in a vault. I'm making art to share, and so one way or another, it has to be shared. Otherwise the project isn't complete. This is it has to do with audience participations. Artists can say, I want, you want things coming from the top down. Well, no, not really. You want them coming from underneath or around you. And that is, there are a lot of artists, okay? And in a way where artists tend to be kind of like good at one thing and not good at something else oftentimes, or even come across as being kind of, self-centered. But ultimately, art is something that you're doing coming from yourself, and you're sharing with other people. So the change has to do with not, say, your question was, about the art world. Well, there's no art world. Art world is artists making art. And so the change is to bypass this art world and just get support from people around you, buying a painting, coming to a show, buying your merch, going to your concerts. And this has nothing to do with the larger economic system. It has to do with people being supportive of each other. And the way that I've come to terms with this, the way of describing this is something called, it's just support. And sometimes that support is financial. Sometimes it's just showing up. Sometimes it's just supporting someone by being kind and by saying a few good words, sharing and supporting without, say, trying to take something away. Like, the point is that the art is the thing that you're taking away. The painting itself, the songs, or wherever it happens to be, that is the communication. And so being supportive in a way that allows people to sort of be themselves without, say, adding more stress to the equation. Like, it's already hard enough to communicate just as a human being, and then you add a level of being a hypersensitive person on top. Okay, well, that here I am sharing myself with you. Okay, now are you gonna, be cool about it, or are you gonna like be critical, or are you gonna be jealous, or whatever it happens to be? The point is that the change ultimately, if anybody's going to do better in art, it means we need a bigger audience. That's it, plain and simple. And instead of say buying 6 things on Amazon, buy one thing locally to support someone, because what you're doing is you can see the result of that right in front of you. You're helping someone survive. You're helping someone make more art. You can't do that by supporting a major corporation. It's not even the same thing. Quit while you're ahead, so that I can do well. Is what I would recommend. Just go ahead and quit, and support me instead. All joking aside, understand that I think so. I kind of came to this conclusion, like commerce is competition, and spirituality is cooperation. And so I think artists ultimately it's more about cooperation in a way. The spiritual aspect of it is, and the return for spiritual work is not financial. It's spiritual. And it's something that has to do with what's happening inside you. And I think that artists are doing this thing. There are a lot of people that will be, how do you say this? If you could do it, wouldn't you do it? Yeah, that's why you're doing it. You're continuing to do it because you have a talent, or you have a gift. Now, don't let it destroy you either. You're going to have to find a balance in this thing. I don't think, and I'd say most people that are working really hard, harder than they want to, are going to say that this is a very well-designed system. And I'd say it's not. You just look around, it's brown and gray out there. That's how people are building buildings. So this thing that we're doing is all important, and we'll never get there, really. But that's the very point, just to make these beautiful moments, to continue doing it. And I think these are the things that inspire people to keep living life, and that oftentimes is the role of the artist, is to give people that meaning that otherwise they can't see, or they're not going to be able to experience.
The space started as we were in another location. It was a vacant studio-owned building scheduled for demolition, and a couple city agencies they put out a call for artists to occupy this building that would be otherwise vacant until it was going to be demolished. And there was about 14 artists that came up with the idea of Current. We were there for about 5 years until they were going to move forward with the demolition, and we found this spot, which was like another vacant city-owned building that had enough space to have studios and like a performance space. And we were interested in this spot because we were near the H&H building, which was like an artist housing warehouse performance space. But yeah, I guess that's kind of like the trajectory. Eventually, when the city put out this building for developers to bid on, we talked to friends of ours, like, how do we become a developer and bid on it and like not get displaced again? And we ended up getting the space started at the old space in the end of 2004. We moved here in 2010, and then we gained ownership in 2019 of this space. But during that time period, we were just like on a month-to-month lease, and so it kind of like shaped how we kind of like were forced to have like a fast-paced exhibition schedule, and like I don't know, it kind of shaped our operations.
Like Michael, you personally joined Current Space like 6 months into its existence, and I joined like maybe 10 years ago.
I joined, so initially when it started at the old space, it was 14, and people were kind of taking turns having like solo shows or organizing exhibitions, and then about 6 months into the project, half the people like were ready to leave, and so they got new people and brought it back up to 14 artists. And I was just going on long walks and came across the space, and went to like they were like recruiting people, and kind of just by happenstance, I guess. We were kind of, the old space was near the Gallery Mall, which is now shut down, but we were just kind of this weird storefront that people were always like, what is this like thing that goes out of business every month? Like, what is this?
Like every time an exhibition changed over, people would think it was closing. We still get that actually. Like here, even though we're on Howard, like people will be like, "Oh, are you guys about to open?" Like, "Oh, I've been here since 2010, just reopening another show."
Yeah.
I joined in 2009. I had a studio at Current Space. So I had just graduated and wanted to kind of immerse myself in the arts culture in Baltimore, and came across Current Space online somewhere, and then I wanted to become involved in an arts organization, and was able to do that at Current, and then got more involved in maybe like 2011 or 12, and just gradually more involved over the years.
I think just adapting over time and trying to like, up until recently it was mostly volunteer run, so it's always like trying to keep it sustainable as far as like paying the overhead costs of like the building and the like utilities and upkeep and stuff, and then trying to keep like the energy levels high enough to sustain in that way as well. Like, so like adapting the model to keep everybody interested. And then more recently, it's been trying to introduce more elements so we can create jobs for people,
Including us.
including ourselves. I mean, we have studios, we have the exhibitions and like ticketing from like events. We just got a liquor license a couple years ago.
That was a big addition to like how we are funding ourselves. We're definitely like subsidizing some of the things we're doing here and some of our own pay through the bar sales. And
We have like a fiscal agent, so we can apply for smaller nonprofit grants.
we have a membership program.
Yeah.
That's actually a pretty large chunk of our funding, bigger than grants at this point, or bigger than like the kind of recurring city grants that we might get.
That's like, there's a couple hundred people donating $5 to $25 a month, but it's like consistent. I mean, there's a couple different, I guess a lot of the artist-run spaces were self-funded, so I think people got, there's like either like energy or financially got worn down, or like there were a lot of obstacles with like permitting after Ghost Ship. There was like trying to navigate that, which was like a big financial barrier for most people. It could be like $30,000 in fire safety improvements or more. But yeah, and I think just like, but yeah, a lot of different reasons. I think primarily like financial barriers. If you're like having to fill in the gap with like a day job, and then like having additional costs, it's like it was challenging.
I think the Ghost Ship fire did have a really big impact as well.
There's a warehouse in
Oakland
that burned down, and like
some people died. It was really tragic and very sad, and so it also alerted a lot of. I mean, no other city wanted to be like have the next Ghost Ship fire, so they really cracked down on artist-run spaces that were in warehouses, just warehouse spaces in general, or anything that wasn't permitted or up to code. So
I think also like there was like it was leading up to the election at that time, and so there was like an interest in shutting down spaces like near DC. So people were just kind of filing complaints, hoping some would stick as like a targeted like trolling attack.
So a lot of places were shut down across the whole country, and including in Baltimore. Like the Bell Foundry was a great space that artists were like evicted from in the middle of the night because it was suddenly deemed unsafe, and so that made that financial barrier so much greater, because you couldn't just kind of start running events out of a space that you had come across, or like an empty, unused space. It had to have sprinklers. It had to have egress. It just had to have a lot more funding attached to it. And buildings that are already had those things weren't like available affordably to artists. So it made it a lot harder to start something.
I guess being able to like make decisions quickly and adapt. The challenges would be like income and like buying your own time. I feel like it was, for the longest time, it was like a volunteer run space. So it was kind of like, what we're trying to figure out now is like, how do we generate enough money so people can do stuff here rather than some other like day job.
And us.
And us too. I mean, there's so many.
I know. I was looking at
But
that question. I couldn't think of one.
I think just like we've been working on equipping the space so that we can accommodate a lot of like variety of projects. So we have like the exhibition space, and then we have we just reopened the project space.
Just another gallery space.
And then we have a performance space, but also just being able to, I think, because we have like multiple sources of like that we can lean on different income streams, that we can do exhibitions that aren't relying on sales all the time, or like we can I guess we're able to do time-based things as well, and installation.
I would say I am really proud of the recurring events that we have here. I think there are a few things that we've started to do on a regular basis, maybe like yearly or biannually, and I think I'm proud that people who are organizing those feel that we're a good partner, and that like that it's been a good event that they want to bring back year after year. I feel like proud that those things are happening over and over, and like a few examples would be like there's a big fashion show we have every fall that Meg Beck organizes called Fantasy Machine, and I think it's been really fun and successful, but also that like she's wanted to bring it back. It's been a good thing. Like the artists that we work with are feeling like they're getting what they need from Current Space, or Black Cherry Puppet Theater hosts their Slam Witch here twice a year, or we have like a DJ residency with Jay Swan that was really fun last year, and it's like about to get started again. So I think people wanting to keep going with their projects feels like not only are we being sustained, but they also must be finding things sustainable here.
I think like creating a space where things can exist. Oh, I guess like I was thinking about like more spaces. It's cool to see like things starting back up and like around the city too, and like seeing other people that like also like people that we've worked with that are like starting their own space, which is kind of exciting to see.
I think whenever we have student groups come, Michael always tells them like your best resource are the people sitting right around you right now, your classmates, and you should like work together to build something bigger than yourselves, and like hoping that more like artists will work together to do that. Incremental growth has really been helpful to Current Space, and sometimes people can be overwhelmed with the idea of attempting to start out a project like fully realized, rather than just starting with like whatever they can do when they can do it and growing as they can. That would be my advice, I guess, just to start doing what it is you can do and to work with other people to make it happen.
Yeah, I think that's a big part. Like even just like, I mean, a lot of the warehouse spaces, it would be like 5 or 10 people living together, and kind of that shared resource, having like their living room became a big warehouse or like a venue or art gallery, but like the shared resources kind of created that possibility.
I think it was mainly working in a museum that I worked at the Corcoran Gallery of Art for 7 years. And basically, you kind of realized slowly that, I mean, you know, I would meet all these artists I was taught to look up to. And I was told they're amazing, but it's a different thing when you have to work for them. And so I met a lot of artists that, you know, I was a big fan of, and then they're just shitty people. So I was like, you know, it just demystified what was actually happening. And also the museum was run by idiots. So it was just like a completely different thing you're taught. So that's where I kind of like, after 7 years, and I was like, there's no space for me here. All these people are like connected to wealthy people in some way, or you have to be pretending you have to do this whole act to be involved in that with these people who are all like sort of narcissists. So I just was like, I'm not going to be able to do this traditionally. I'm like not from a music family. I have to do my own thing and try to create my own structure. And it was just like a living room gallery that where we could just do whatever we wanted. But it happened to coincide with the murder of, oh no, I'm blanking.
What year?
2014. There have been so many murders.
Freddie Gray?
No, Freddie Gray was before. Eric Gardner.
Eric Gardner.
So at our very first show, we were making a lot of art. I think me and 2 friends were just passing around art, like collaborating. And then that happened. and there were a lot of protests, and I was going to the protests, and I was just thinking about art. And the first show was called This Isn't Activist Enough, which was like a joke, I think my friend said, was like kind of making fun of the art we were making, but it was also like, it just isn't enough, like we're not doing enough, we're just making paintings and selling them for ourselves, but like it doesn't, so that's where I think the contradiction started, or understanding the contradiction of art making and activism. And so the first show was kind of making fun of ourselves as artists, but I think for me it just kind of stuck that like it just isn't enough to make paintings about art. You're actually just gatekeeping in some ways, or monetizing off of other people's work. And that's where I think the seed of Nomu Nomu, like what it is now, it started from that first show. I mean, that's the main thing. Like Nomu Nomu for the first 5-7 years-ish had no money. It was just, I would collaborate with galleries and they'd give me a budget, you know, of like $3,000 or $5,000. I'd pay myself $700. Like, there's no, they don't, and then like, you don't sell any work. Like, so there's no money. I mean, and the only way we got here is because someone bought these buildings and asked me to kind of run it the way I would want to run it. I've been running Nomu Nomu, but the challenge in the past year and two has been like, will anyone else fund this? Mm-hmm. And we were able to get, you know, community investment, but that's not enough, especially in Baltimore. It's just not a lot of money. We've had one other donor who's been very generous, but you know, the problem with arts funding is it's all like a grift, to be frank. I don't know. It's just like there's no, sorry, they're assets. Art is wealthy people's assets. The art world is the people that maintain those assets. And art investment is the sort of appreciation of those assets. So essentially when you're talking about the art world and what it is now in its current form, you're just talking about the from a top-down sort of politics. So the wealthy control the politics of these things, and then obviously there's these sort of liberal concessions of like, oh, you know, whatever group, marginalized group can access these things. These are things that sort of help give the appearance of goodwill and like kindness, but that's not what's happening. And if you're trying to create something that is built from the bottom up, where you're challenging these, actually challenging and actually changing these systems that enable billionaires to exist, they're not gonna give you any money to do that. Well, again, it's funding, and well, the landscape of Baltimore is brutal. I would say, like there's not many jobs. It's very hard to. It's very small, actually. The funding systems are very small. It's very bureaucratic. It's very difficult to get permits. It's difficult to get fire stuff. But I mean but it is like a very creative city, and people can do what they want to do here, and that's why people come here, and people can live cheaply here. But it's very hard to sustain, because you're not gonna make sales, there's no like sort of like in DC there's a sort of large because of gentrification, there's like this weird middle class of young professionals who want art, and you know that group, and they kind of like edgy things, and that group will pay for art in the range of like hundreds to even a few thousand. That doesn't really exist in Baltimore, so you have to rely heavily on just like donations, and I mean an occasional buyer might come through, but it's not common. I'd say like in Baltimore, there's the Deutsche Foundation, and they fund this group motor house or this thing, but you'll see that it's like a group of people who are like paying themselves and like investing in property. And then you have like, you know, these things like the Tool Library, or like where they have classes, really expensive. But they're serving a very specific audience, and they're paying themselves and accruing the value of an asset, which is property. So like it's not for other people, and that's the problem with when you're working outside of that. Like you're not in the game, and so what happens is you have to like kind of build your way up, either like into their good favors, and their good favors is like how it helps them get wealthier, or you just have to do it independently through other sources. It's like the narrative of the art world is very like, there's this gallery and like, oh, they came up on their own, they pulled themselves up by the bootstraps in New York in the 70s or something. But it was just cheap property for wealthy people, and that's what happened. Like it's not this bottom up, like slowly building a business. That's not a real thing. I mean, it's rare. It's very rare. And you know, I was kind of able to do it, but it was only because one wealthy person gave me enough money to give it the boost it needed. Yeah, in Baltimore, there's just not money for experimental spaces, and people will be here because of the cheap rent, and you know they'll have a job, but it can't sustain. You can't just like put all your money into this passion project and make no money for 5 years. You'll just be broke. And so like people try to. Baltimore's a great place to like kind of elevate your career, but eventually people move because they hit the wall of funding, because Baltimore's also extremely small. And I think a lot of people want to stay here, but the city does not actually offer that much incentive. And that's the problem, is that Baltimore is inherently constructed in a racist way, I'd say. So like the city, the infrastructure, like where we are and certain parts you can see, they're very deeply divested in. And I don't remember the exact, like you can read the book about how redlining stuff work in Baltimore, but essentially like the suburbs or the outer parts of Baltimore control what's happening in the inner parts of white neighborhoods, intentionally divest from the black neighborhoods, and that has an impact on stuff like the arts, and because they make it so that there's no like public anything, or not much, and that's their priority. It's not to serve the public, it's to serve themselves. So there are grants and stuff, but it's not like the function of the city is not to like incentivize the arts. It's not. I don't think that's a thought. I have not figured that out at all. I don't know what it's like. That's the problem with nonprofits, is that they rely on grants, a lot of public grants, and they're kind of just always making their salaries, and then like enough to do a little bit of something, but it's really like based on kind of kicking a rock down the road. It's not like, there's not much there. Even I'm not really sure. You just need a lot of money, like, and if you don't have a philanthropist behind it, you're not gonna thrive. You're not gonna be able to like have this 4 or 5 year vision of what it is. You're like, that's what most nonprofits are, just like working to appease the grants, and that's it. So not really thinking about their long-term impact. They're just like, how do we get the next year or two? So I don't know if there's an answer for that. And I would love to know if someone does have an answer. I think the more I'm, after 2 years, I'm definitely steering away from artists having so much say in this. I do believe it should be primarily community driven. I think I would like to see education, critical pedagogy, like being more a part of it, where people can come here and take classes. People maybe might do food distribution, maybe be a coffee shop, like things where like people can start to organize and educate the communities they serve. I do think being an art space is still very important, but it's just like, how does art manifest in that context? I'm not sure, I haven't seen it. But it would be, more reliant on the community's maintenance and like the art that comes out of that. I don't think I would, I'm steering further away from contemporary art, like solo shows and group shows, because it's just, artists are just, it's sort of socialized in this very selfish way that's been very difficult to manage. What Nomu Nomu is it's kind of an old school model that neoliberalism over the past 30, 40 years, like completely moved out of the way, right? Like they're going at libraries right now. It's like they're the space of the commons, the public, the community center, the rec center, the soup kitchen. Like it's more like that, where it's just like wealthy or middle class people are donating their money and their time to service other people who don't have access, right? And then those people, also the marginalized, are donating their time and money, working to service the underprivileged, and like, but it's gotten so bad in America, it's just like, I don't think that concept is really prevalent as much as it used to be. So the past 2 years, I feel like people have been kind of slowly understanding, oh, like I'm giving my time because, with Palestine, it's just like, I need to give my money and my time to these people who are being completely murdered, and like, like I'm in a good position comparatively, so now I do these things for other people. So it's just like, it's been a hard, like, it feels like this, people have been learning and I've been learning as I go what this means now, to create a space for community. And yeah, I still don't, I don't know if there's many models. Like I said, there's the People's Forum, but that's funded by a billionaire. And I think you have General Baker Institute, and that is funded by the community, where they're just thriving in New York City, you know, with a Manhattan, downtown, whatever. And then you have another one where they're just like barely getting by, and then running off of their own money. So there's no, then you have us, which is like dwindling, just dwindling. I think the Posters for Palestine show was a really good example where the expectation was for artists not to fucking foreground themselves, right? So everyone was anonymous, everyone donated work, everyone who bought that work, and everyone who donated work didn't expect the money to go to them, didn't expect them, that, you know, all the work was, it's sort of flattened, and so you had, you know, a few famous artists in there, or really good artists, with a lot of like just like random protest art that, you know, some kid made, and like aesthetically it was all like one, because everyone was unified in their message, and everyone was unified, kind of in their colors, and then the community's expectation was not to be given their like precious art. It's just like, cool, this is an exchange of money for another cause that is more important than us. And some people bought art but never even came to get their art, you know, didn't matter. And that's ultimately what art is. It doesn't matter, it's just like a thing. There just needs to be way more, I mean, the city needs so much more money. I don't know what, like, we need food. That's what's weird about Baltimore. It's just like, we need clean water and food, like access to food, groceries, like those are things that art cannot fix. It needs so much more transportation, like, and that's where it just felt like in our first year I was kind of scrambling, because it was like, oh, what does the community need? And it's like, oh shit, this community needs everything. Like I can't, there's nothing an art gallery can do. So I think all we can really do is find like the people who are advocating for their needs and find ways to like empower them in some way. As far as the arts go, yeah, Baltimore just needs to fund the arts. I mean, I think there needs to be a very concerted effort to make these galleries that you're talking about, all these experimental spaces, stay. Because what happened was, I think it was during Trump administration, remember that ghost ship thing? Where like something caught on fire. It was like a DIY space kind of.
Oh, okay.
And, but eventually, like, I think some of these Trump people realized that they could just call fire department or something and like say, oh, they have these regulations they're violating, and then they get shut down. And so that became a thing for a while, and I think a few places in Baltimore got shut down. Like, the right will do things like that just to fuck with people, and there's no effort on the other side to like push back and understand, like, that's the thing, is if the right understands the importance of these spaces and actively operates to shut them down, then the left has to push to ensure it might not be a leftist sort of space. It's just like the freedom or like the ownership of marginalized people that is important. You know, it's not just the representation. This is where liberal co-option comes in and just like throws up representation, but you need empowerment. You need, you know, spaces owned by trans people, or you need spaces that are owned by queer people. Like, or whatever intersection you're talking about, you need them to last for a long time so that people can, these communities can build their wealth and articulate, or just like relaxing, I don't know. It's just, there's a rant. I started a rant. I think it's just to start it, do whatever idea you have, do it. And I think that's the part that's really weird, is like, I know wealthy people, or people connected to wealth, who are still like trying to navigate the museum world. And it's like, that's dumb. Like, just see what you got and like start your own shit. And that's the only way that anything, you can't, don't, like, it's, if you do believe in like, it's just like, yeah, you have to just start, and you don't know what's gonna happen. Like, but, cause I just started doing it, and then like, first show was pretty successful, second show, it'll have your ups and downs, but you have to just keep pushing. Even this space, that it's difficult to maintain, but you figure it out, and then support people who are doing it, right? It's just like full turn away from celebrities, anyone who's been propped up in some way to take your money. Like, that's all it is. It's just like buying into this branding is like, my whole worldview is changing, so kind of hard to articulate, but it's just like, you're kind of seeing it right now. It's just museum culture, celebrity culture, Hollywood, all that shit is just like, it's just ways to take your money. And I don't mean that in like that's what they're doing. They're profiting off of us. So like, just do your own thing and profit for yourself. It's very easy. Start a LLC, sell things, you know, do the work on that, and you just start making profits. And then, or get your friends together, start a 501c3 and start a nonprofit. It's not hard. I mean, it can be pricey, but, you know, collectivize your money and whatever. It's a better investment than wasting your mental energy on getting other